Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, as aid barely trickles into Gaza, a group of activists try to break Israel's siege themselves.
We put Israel on notice that we were coming, that we were unarmed civilians carrying humanitarian aid, intending to deliver it directly to Gaza.
We hear the story of their years-long struggle. I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take. In the last few months, hundreds of civilian activists have been organizing where many of their governments have failed, trying to get tons of aid into Gaza. Among them is Huwaida Arraf.
I'm a Palestinian-American human rights attorney, and I am one of the coordinators of the Gaza Freedom Flotilla.
With land entrances blocked or highly restricted, it's a mission they intend to take by sea.
At a port in southern Turkey, this cargo ship is being loaded with aid that may well never be delivered.
This flotilla is an emergency flotilla to confront and challenge and try to break Israel's illegal siege on Gaza.
The movement to break Israel's naval blockade on Gaza has existed for more than a decade. Huwaida has been on 4 boats that have successfully done it, and 3 that haven't. And after October 7th, it became clear pretty quickly that they wanted to sail again.
We called an emergency meeting in Istanbul where we had people representing the various national campaigns fly in and determine whether or not we can send an emergency flotilla. We did take a decision that we had to try. And that was in mid-February. Within just a couple of months, slightly over 2 months, we were almost ready to go. Hundreds of people gathered in Istanbul from 40 countries around the world, ready to set sail, carrying over 5,000 tons of life-saving aid for the people of Gaza.
That included civilians like Helen O'Sullivan, an educator from Australia.
We are watching what's happening every day on the news, and no one seems to be speaking up loud enough. We all have children. I have grandchildren. There's the age of those 12,000 plus children who have been killed already.
By April 25th, they were ready to go. And then
hundreds of activists aboard the Freedom Flotilla were blocked in Turkey as they attempted to set sail for the besieged Palestinian territory.
The delay is over administrative issues. Organizers say it was political pressure by Israel and the U.S.
It's a sad indictment, I guess, on the powerful nations of the world that civilians have to risk their lives to deliver food and baby formula to starving people. And our governments not only did not support our efforts, but expended energy to actively try to stop us.
To Huwaida, what they've encountered is a setback. She says they're still intending to set sail in the coming weeks, but Gaza is facing a famine, and weeks could make the difference. Huwaida is used to these kinds of roadblocks. She's been organizing for Palestinian rights for decades now.
Shortly after graduating from college, I moved to the occupied Palestinian territory, and I became active in the Second Palestinian Intifada, which broke out shortly after I arrived in Palestine. That meant joining Palestinians in the street, protesting Israeli occupation policies. Israeli soldiers responded to unarmed civilian protests with brute force, shooting to kill. Being in the occupied Palestinian territory, I wake up one day and there's a tank pointing its turret in front of my house. So there was this in me, a certain idealism. I wouldn't say naivete, but definitely idealism and a strong sense of this injustice cannot stand. And, we have to confront it. Yeah, I have to get out in front of that tank. I remember talking to the Israeli soldiers through a megaphone from my house and reading resistance lines to them, and just a sense of indignation and wanting to fight back in the ways that I could fight back.
One way was nonviolent direct action. Huwaida co-founded the International Solidarity Movement with other activists to do just that. The idea to sail to Gaza was born out of that movement.
One volunteer from Australia threw out the idea, what about we sail a boat to Gaza?
This was around the end of 2006. Huwaida was 30.
Honestly, I was in law school at the time, and I thought it was an absurd idea because we didn't have a boat and we didn't have money to get a boat, and none of us knew anything about boats. But a small group continued to pursue that idea, and in the summer of 2008, it manifested into these 2 small fishing boats with 44 civilians from around the world that were ready to set sail and challenge the blockade and challenge the Israeli Navy.
At that point, the Israeli blockade that Gaza became known for was still new. It had only been put in place the year before.
Israel imposed its blockade on the Gaza Strip after Hamas was elected in 2006. Withholding of supplies and increased control of its residents effectively turned Gaza into the world's largest open-air prison.
Israel, along with Egypt, has maintained a siege on Gaza by land, air, and sea since 2007. The Israeli government says the blockade is a security measure to keep weapons from getting into Gaza. Huwaida and her fellow organizers wanted to challenge that logic by coming as peace activists.
And we had planned out all kinds of scenarios that, everyone might be arrested. Israel might try to sink our ships or blow our ship out of the water. We planned for all of these scenarios except for actually making it to Gaza. We definitely did not plan on making it in. But while we were at sea, we received a call on one of the sat phones informing us that Israel just announced that it was not going to intercept our boats. And that was just unbelievable, like a momentous occasion. And as we got closer to the Gaza port, it was incredible. Thousands and thousands of people rushed to the port because they had heard the news to welcome us. People were jumping in the sea to swim out to our boats. And the excitement and the love that was expressed was hard to explain and hard to understand. How, people so persecuted and traumatized and doing what they can to stay alive can show so much welcome, love, and compassion to foreigners coming from the countries that are complicit in this situation. And I continue to marvel at Palestinian ability to do that, despite the fact that this world has given them absolutely no foundation to do so. And that's just something very profound about the Palestinian people. Even though I'm Palestinian myself, I marvel at it.
Even though they had made it into Gaza, Huwaida said the siege hadn't really been broken. Not yet, at least.
We would have to keep going and coming repeatedly until we effectively opened a sea route from Gaza to the outside world. And we promised Palestinians in Gaza that that's what we would do.
In 2008, they went back and forth successfully from Gaza 4 more times. But by the end of the year, Israeli ships began intercepting their boats.
That boat, while according to our CNN reporter Carl Penhall, who was on it at the time, was in international waters, was rammed by an Israeli patrol boat.
The Israelis have put out that it was an accident, that the Dignity was trying to outmaneuver those Israeli patrol boats. That just did not happen on the boat where I was. And sorry to say it.
So over the next several months of 2009, they tried again and again, but they continued to be intercepted.
And it was at that point that we understood that the choice before us was we either give up on this tactic or we try to escalate. And we definitely did not want to give in to this notion that Israel's brutality, Israel's military might was stronger than the rights we were fighting for. And so we naturally decided to escalate.
Chants for freedom and a wave of Turkish and Palestinian flags, seeing off the biggest humanitarian convoy ever to set sail to Gaza.
The Mavi Marmara, the lead ship of the self-styled Freedom Flotilla heading to Gaza.
In May 2010, we had 7 ships, 4 passenger vessels, 3 cargo ships loaded with 10,000 tons of aid and rebuilding supplies. And we had nearly 700 people set sail to try to reach Gaza in this huge flotilla.
If we are attacked or blocked by the Israeli Navy, there is consensus that we will remain steadfast, that we will try and resist attempts, to deter us from reaching the Gaza Strip.
On early in the morning of May 31st, 2010, our flotilla came under a full-on military assault.
Around dawn, the Israeli Navy moved in.
The Israeli Navy and maybe other branches of the military came at us by sea on Zodiacs from helicopters, sending commandos down on our boats, and ended up killing 10 volunteers, 10 of our colleagues, brutalizing dozens of others, taking everyone hostage. That was horrific. That was an escalation and conduct that, even though I had seen the extent of Israel's brutality, something that I honestly had not expected. But in normal Israeli style, they tried to blame it on us, calling us a terrorist mission, all to try to justify their unjustifiable, illegal conduct.
Israeli officials had said they would only allow aid from the flotilla if it docked in Israel first to determine what aid to let in.
Israel's defense minister Ehud Barak said he regretted the loss of life, but blamed the activists.
The responsibility lies within those who initiated this pledge and those who organized the convoy.
Israel initially defended the deadly raid, but then years later apologized and paid a multi-million-dollar settlement to the victims' families.
But again, the governments of the world did nothing.
And the U.S. defended Israel. Here's then Vice President Joe Biden.
So what's the big deal here? What's the big deal of insisting it go straight to Gaza? Well, it's legitimate for Israel to say, I don't know what's on that ship.
It's the same point Israel is raising when it comes to getting aid into Gaza today. More on that after the break. For months now, the UN has been warning that Gaza, especially northern Gaza, has been on the brink of a famine.
I feel like my children will die in front of my eyes. What can I say? I don't know what I am to do. I can feel them dying before my eyes. This is my daughter. It's been 5 days she is without food or drink.
Israeli officials, like military spokesman Daniel Hagari, claim Israel is not the roadblock to Palestinians getting aid.
Israel continues to facilitate the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza and find new ways to increase this effort.
Meanwhile, hundreds of trucks filled with supplies are currently waiting in Egypt, stalled from getting through checkpoints.
You still have a long list of items that Israel is banning from entering, and you still have the reality that not nearly enough aid is getting in to address the severity of the crisis. And people are still dying of mass starvation and widespread disease. That is unconscionable. That is unconscionable that children are starving to death while food is just a couple of miles away.
The U.S. solution to this has been to construct a pier off the coast of Gaza.
We are over 50% complete on setting up the pier. The floating pier has been completely constructed and set up. The causeway is in progress.
That's U.S. Pentagon spokesperson Sabrina Singh last week. So far, the cost of the pier is running at $320 million.
The pier is a massive, expensive, wholly unnecessary distraction from the fact that the United States is not doing what needs to be done in order to compel Israel to allow in the aid that is needed to save people's lives.
Meanwhile, inside Gaza, the Israeli military has killed more than 200 of the workers distributing the aid that's made it in. It's in this atmosphere that the mission to organize the flotilla took shape.
While we knew that we could not guarantee anyone's safety, we were trying to do everything we could to increase our protection.
Everyone who was set to go in the flotilla underwent nonviolence training. Organizers invited media to join them on the ships and access the cargo. That was for transparency. But Huwaida says the publicity was also its own source of protection.
And therefore, it would be obvious to the world if they attacked us that it was a deliberate attack. All of these things didn't guarantee that we would stay safe, but it was trying to ensure our protection as much as we could. But then the rest is, what would Israel do?
For Huwaida, a lot has changed since her last flotilla trip in 2010. She's now a mom, raising her 2 kids at home in the U.S. state of Michigan.
Shortly before leaving, I spoke about the history of our efforts to break the siege. My daughter, who likes to attend Palestine events with me, wanted to come, and so I brought her along, but it didn't hit me that she was in the audience as I was speaking. And so when I mentioned that in 2010, Israel killed 10 volunteers, when I got off the stage, my daughter looked at me and said, "Does that mean you can die?" And she broke out crying uncontrollably. I have a 9-year-old girl and an 11-year-old boy. They did not want me to come. But in the end, I think that they understood that I needed to. And as my kids were hugging me goodbye at the airport, I promised them that I would be back in a few weeks. And I really intended to fulfill that promise, as everyone else who's coming to join this flotilla. Of course, everyone wants to go back home to their families. No one was here to go on any kind of suicide mission. But we were fully willing to accept the fact that there were no guarantees for our safety. I can't imagine not doing this, because not being part of this flotilla would mean passing on to my kids a very dangerous, ugly world. And So for me, it is about doing what I can to make the world a better, safer place for them.
In April, Huwaida arrived in Istanbul to set sail again.
The 2010 flotilla took us 10 months to organize. We pulled this flotilla together in a little over 2 months. After we had managed to obtain the vessels, then we have to flag the vessels.
Every commercial ship, like the flotilla's cargo ship, needs to fly under a country's flag. Often not the country the ship is sailing from, in this case, Turkey.
Guinea-Bissau was just one that we could obtain quickly. It didn't take as long as some other flags would have taken.
The lead ship Akdeniz bears the flag of the Republic of Guinea-Bissau. Organizers say there's been pressure to have the flag removed and stop the vessel from departing.
All of the participants were ready, were packed, all our papers had been submitted to the port authorities. And on the eve of when we were supposed to sail, we get a call saying that Guinea-Bissau, they want to inspect our ship. Even knowing that this was going to delay our planned departure, we agreed to the inspection. Before the inspector even finished, we get a communication from the office responsible for the flagging, requiring a number of things that would have been impossible for us to meet, and specifically referencing our planned trip to Gaza. Before we even responded, we got another communication saying, we've canceled your flag. So again, this is not the first time we've did this. We've flagged and sailed over 30 different vessels over the years. This was highly unusual, and so it was clear it's coming from outside pressure.
We reached out to Guinea-Bissau's ship registry, and they said that their processes, quote, adhere strictly to established protocols and international legislation. Before the flotilla lost their flag, Israeli media reported that the government hoped they'd be delayed indefinitely. The day before they were set to sail, the U.S. government echoed Joe Biden's words from 2010. This is State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel.
Freedom Flotilla, look, we welcome any country or any entity wanting to do more to help alleviate the suffering in Gaza. We just believe that this kind of assistance that is ultimately destined for Gaza, it needs to be transmitted through the legitimate crossings and established channels. That is the best way.
We hope to go again soon. It's a setback to us for sure, but this is not the first time Israel has tried to sabotage our missions. One thing I knew for sure is that this setback won't stop us. It's frustrating and devastating because we know how dire the situation is in Gaza. I mean, how many more people are going to die before we are able to set sail again? Like every day, every hour, every minute counts. On the other hand, I know wholeheartedly that Israel cannot and will not crush our determination to break the siege and reach the people of Gaza. So I know that we will sail.
And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Negin Owliaei, with Amy Walters, Ashish Malhotra, Tabish Talib, Catherine Newhen, Chloe K. Lee, David Enders, Veronica Campana, Khalid Sultan, Manahil Naveed, Sari Al-Khalili, Sonia Bagat, Tamara Kandakar, Zaina Badr, and me, Malika Bilal. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Alexandra Locke is The Take's executive producer, and Ney Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.